It might have taken 6 years, but President Obama is starting to learn how to play the game. He's getting smarter. Ever since Obama took office back in 2008, a growing number of Americans has been voicing their concerns about how Obama uses his presidential powers. Is he pushing too far? Is he abusing the power of the position? And does this spark a dangerous precedent for future presidents? All valid questions. But amid so much criticism for his infamous executive orders, the commander-in-chief has started to implement a new political strategy. Instead of calling it an official executive order, just call it by another name. But as we're finding out, President Obama's presidential memorandums carry the same legal authority as an executive order. The only major difference, they just don't show up on the official record as an executive order. It's a deceptive tactic to lie to the American people. Obama's supporters have long argued that the president doesn't really abuse his office because the number of executive actions pale in comparison to some of his predecessors in the Oval Office. But there are two major problems with that argument. For one, the actual content inside those executive actions are far more egregious and far more politically one-sided and pull much harder against the Constitution than any other president. But secondly, it's really just a lie. Not true. President Obama has demanded more presidential memos to federal employees than any U.S. president since Harry Truman nearly 70 years ago. And folks, he's only 6 years into this presidency. 25% of the Obama administration is still on the horizon. The number of memos is only going to get bigger. But in front of thousands of people in Austin, Texas earlier this year, the president revealed why he's covertly been using the presidential memo instead of the executive order. It's because it allows him to say things like this.
The truth is, even with all the actions I've taken this year, I'm issuing executive orders at the lowest rate in more than 100 years. So it's not clear, how it is that Republicans didn't seem to mind when President Bush took more executive actions than I did. Maybe it's just me they don't like. I don't know. Maybe there's some principle out there that I haven't discerned.
Yes, that principle would be honesty, transparency, integrity, and sincerity with the American people. A president that didn't intentionally hide and mask his executive orders under a different name, sure. It's easy to look good when comparing yourself to George W. Bush, but is that his standard of excellence? Should we grade every president through the prism of George W.? It turns out when you add up the number of executive orders and presidential memos, Obama has abused his power more than any president since Democrat Jimmy Carter. Democrats and Republicans can both agree those aren't good steps to follow. And just like executive orders, memos from the president's desk carry the same amount of force of law, and they don't require any action by Congress. Barack Obama's version of the truth says he's only issued 195 executive orders, and that number is lower than other presidents. But the whole story paints a different picture. In addition to Obama's 195 executive orders, he's also demanded federal employees obey and carry out 198 presidential memos. Exactly the same thing as an executive order. It's no wonder why a recent CNN report shows more Americans voted Barack Obama as the worst president since World War II. 33% of Americans, 1/3, picked Obama as the worst, followed closely by George W. Bush, Richard Nixon, and Jimmy Carter. Aside from the obvious Watergate scandal, the other three presidents share one thing in common. They top the list of presidents to issue demands instead of lead in Congress.